Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we journey into a story where time itself is not a river, but a predator. A story of stolen minutes, haunted tapes, and a mystery that began with a box outside a door. This is the 19 minutes, 3 full chapters of darkness, suspense, and echoes that refuse to fade. Sit back, dim the lights, and let the ticking begin. The box was the size of a microwave and light as a promise. It waited outside my door when I came home from the night shift, tilted against the peeling number for A like it had walked there on its own and run out of breath. There was no return address, only my name Maya Haddad typed on a yellowed label and scented perfectly, as if a ruler had been involved. The hallway smelled of damp coats and yesterday's cumin, and somewhere in the building a faucet coughed and went quiet. Inside my apartment, I set the box on the kitchen table and looked at it the way a diver studies dark water. I wasn't expecting anything. My mother sends voice notes, my landlord sends threats, and my friends, what's left of them, send reels. Boxers are not part of my normal life. I slit the tape with a butter knife. Beneath a crisp layer of brown paper, a bed of packing straw revealed 10 cassettes, their clear shells immaculate, their tiny screws honest and silver. Each had a white label with neat handwriting, fountain pen, neat 10, a date I recognized. Last Tuesday, last Wednesday, then Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There were 10 days in order, but the 10th label was blank except for a time, 2:17. I don't own a cassette player. No one under 50 does. And yet, the moment I saw them, my hands knew exactly how to hold their weight, how to pinch the edges, how to avoid smudging the ink on the labels. My Uncle Sammy had kept towers of mixed-up spheroos and the Cure on the same shelf, which somehow had made sense. So I grew up with the clicks and flips and rewinds. Uncle Sammy had also disappeared 6 years ago without a note, which absolutely did not make sense. Under the tapes lay a paper map, not printed, drawn by hand. The city was there in messy generosity, the V-shaped river, the belly of the old market, an arrow to the bus depot that's been closed since they privatized ruin. A thin red thread had been stitched right through the paper, emerging and re-entering at different points, making a path through neighborhoods like a careless needle. The thread began at my building, piercing the block where my name would be. If this map had space for the small lives of tenants, and ended at a cross made with 2 strokes, beside the cross a date, tonight, and the time, 2:17. I turned the map over. On the back, a single sentence in that same careful hand: return what isn't yours. My phone buzzed on the counter. That time, 11:13 p.m. A text from my editor asking if the last transcription had issues because the timestamps didn't line up. They did line up. The interviewee had been drunk, or the recorder haunted, or my attention brittle. I told the editor I'd fix it in the morning and set the phone face down. The apartment pressed in with its cheap, white paint, and familiar stains. I took one of the cassettes, the one labeled Tuesday, and held it up to the light. The spools were fully wound left to right, like it had already been played. There was something else in the box. An old, gray portable player. The kind with a belly like a sleeping fish and a single orange button for record. I don't remember lifting it out. I only remember the way my finger felt finding the latch. The way my lungs held still as if my breath might scratch the tape. I slotted in Tuesday, closed the lid, and pressed play. Static, like rain, on vinyl. Then a voice that was familiar. The way a reflection is familiar if the mirror is old. My voice, it starts with a box. I heard myself say, soft? The way I speak when I am alone and don't expect anyone to think any better of me. 10 tapes, a map, and the feeling that been asked to return something you didn't know you stole. I froze. Every part of me, hands, scalp, knees grew ears. I turned the volume down in case the neighbors could hear. The player hummed a little, and the tape went on. You will want a coal, colored, my voice said, naming my ex as if it were the weather. You won't. You will convince yourself that this is some elaborate art piece or a prank layered with kindness. When you reach for the map the second time, you will notice the ring on the paper where a glass once sat. You will think, not my ring, not my glass. But there will be no stain on your table. I looked at the map. There was, in fact, a faint watermark, circular, like the ghost of a glass. My own table was clean. I always wipe it down when I get home. I paused the tape. The sudden silence wasn't relief, it was pressure. Somewhere beyond my window, the city made its after midnight, noisy, distant motorcycles, a couple arguing in soft bullets, a dog that sounded too small for its bravery. I pressed play again. Addoisi desecchi. My voice said, you will be at the old bus depot if you haven't. T already decided to be there. Bring the Saturday tape and the player. Leave the rest. Don't be late. The building isn't fond of waiting. The tape clicked to a stop on its own. I hadn't reached the end. I could see the tape spool, still mostly full. The counter on the player read 19 minutes. I pressed rewind. The tape obeyed with obedient worry, but when I tried to play again, it started with the same sentence, the same cadence, the same sudden click to silence at exactly 19 minutes. I checked my phone. Jam 11 lewat 32 menit PM. I poured water into a glass I didn't tea. Remember washing and sipped like someone in a hospital. Then I swapped tapes. Saturday. The handwriting on this one looked identical, except the S had a tiny flourish at the tail. It took me 5 tries to press play. Fresh static. Another voice, this time. A man with sunlight in it. He spoke Arabic with the soft edges of the coast. If you can hear this, he said, good. It means you kept your curiosity. I hate your confidence, I muttered. The man laughed on the tape, as if he'd heard me. "I'm Elias," he said. "We don't have to like each other. We just have to agree that the rules are wrong and the world is wider than it pretends. At 2:17, the depot door will be open, not unlocked open. That will seem like a gift. It is not. There are handprints on the back wall. Don't touch them. Don't add yours. And if you hear the clocksy, that clocks don't look for them. There aren't any. There's something else keeping the time." He gave an address that matched the X on the map. He said my name once, testing how it felt in his mouth. He said a number 2:19. He said it twice. Then the tape word 2. Silence. Also at 19 minutes. I stared at the ceiling. The crack that ran diagonally like a failed plan seemed deeper tonight. I know how to ignore strange things. The city trains you in idiot. This insistence, this choreography of time and place, felt tailored. Either someone had built a very expensive trick for me, or the universe had finally decided I was old enough for its party games. At 1:58 a.m., I put on my jacket, pocketed the keys, the Saturday tape, and the player, folded the map, and left. The hallway was colder on the way out. The elevator still had its paper sign out of order that's been true since winter. I took the stairs and counted them like a prayer. Outside, the night was without wind. Street lights stood in their yellow dresses, refusing to be less than theatrical. I walked. The depot is a rusting mouth at the edge of the old quarter. The buses used to sigh, they're like animals. Now we'd stitch the fences, and the graffiti has grown skins over skins. Old slurs hiding under new saints. I half expected to see a security guard asleep under a radio. A thermos of tea forgiving everything. There was no one. The big sliding door was open. I stopped across the street and watched the door as if it could move again. The building ahead was a sketch. High arch. Shadowed windows like unblinking eyes. A plywood sign that had once warned of asbestos, now sun-bleached and fingered with vines. The clock on my phone shuffled from 2:16 to 2:17. "Okay," I said to nobody, and crossed. Inside smelled like wet metal and dew on concrete. The exact aroma of last chances. The depot's cavern held darkness that wasn't merely absence. It felt allocated, like a ration. My steps made small clicks in the dust. Twice. My breath sounded like a stranger's. "Ilias," I called, and hated the hope in it. "Here," someone said, and a shape shouldered out of the dark. He was taller than the voice had led me to expect, and younger, with a beard that looked like he'd argued with it and won. A small flashlight, held low, made a coin of light on the floor. He didn't shine it at my face. I liked him a little for that and was irritated by liking him at all. I held up the player. He held up the same model in his hand, the same scar on the plastic, the same orange record button. "That's new," he said, pointing at my jacket. "Or it will be. Are you making fun of me?" "A little." "Come on." He moved deeper into the depot, the flashlight coin rolling ahead like a tame moon. I followed, because if we were falling into something I wanted company for the landing. The handprints were exactly where the tape said they'd be on the back wall. Shoulder height. A crowd of palms pressed into the concrete. Dozens, maybe 100, layered and overlapped. Big hands, child hands, a thumb with a scar through it, a palm with a missing finger. They were darker than the wall, as if the concrete had absorbed something essential from each touch. I had the sudden, stomach-draining sense of entering a confessional where the sins were real. "Don't," Elias said, as my hand began to lift. I lowered it. My palm tingled anyway, like someone was drawing lines there with a silver pen. "You said clocks," I whispered. "I don't see any." "You won't," he said. "Listen." We listened. Somewhere in the dark, perfectly regular, a faint tick. Not mechanical, too wet, too muscular. Like something small inside a wall was pressing a final syllable of a word it didn't want to say. Tick, tick, tick. Tick. It wasn't until the sound quickened, as if aware of our noticing, that I realized my own heartbeat had cinched to it without permission. Eli set his player on the floor, pressed eject, slotted a tape with no label, and pressed record. "You don't have to," I started. He shooshed me with a look that wasn't unkind. "Sometimes," he said, "they like to hear themselves." Them, he gestured at the wall. The ones who left the prints, or the thing that kept them here long enough to leave them. I don't know. I've stopped naming things I can't argue with. The tick quickened further. A tiny sprint. I felt it like a draft on the back of my neck. The sweat cooling there without exactly being sweat. I wanted to touch the nearest handprint so badly my fingers hummed. Instead, I took the map from my pocket and unfolded it like an apology. The red thread crossed exactly where we stood. I looked for a note I might have missed. On the back, a second line had appeared under the first, in the careful hand. "Return what isn't yours." The minutes, I said aloud before I could stop myself. Elias turned his head. The flashlight coin trembled. His eyes went wide, not with fear, but with recognition. "You lost some," he said. "Tonight already." "I don't think so," I said, and then realized I had no memory of getting from my block to the depot. I remember leaving, the quiet shock of the street lights, the shoes I don't love but wear anyway because they forgive me. The next thing I remember is the depot door. In between there was walking. There must have been. My phone read 2:31. "Don't touch the wall," Elias said again, softer now. "They'll take more." My fingers curled into a fist because otherwise they would not obey me. "Play yours," he said, nodding at my player. "Saturday?" I set it down next to his. The same little beasts churned inside both machines, wheels within wheels. I pressed play. Static peeled back. No voice came this time, just the sound of wind inside a throat and something else layered under it like tape that had been recorded over something older, voices incanted and long sanded by time. I frowned and moved the volume up the smallest degree. 19, a woman's voice said. "Barely there." "Minutes," Another voice added, coaxing or counting. The tick behind us applauded once, unnaturally loud, and then resumed its measured whisper. What happens if we don't return them? I asked, my mouth dry. Nothing, Elias said. Nothing, like nothing, I pushed. He nodded. The minutes you keep are hollow. They look like minutes, taste like minutes, go in your pocket like minutes, but when you take them out, there's no coin, no shine. The day doesn't knit. You forget to salt the eggs. You miss the left turn you've made your whole life. You lose the last sentence of everything people say to you, and also the first and the minutes you earn, the honest ones, don't come back as interest. They think you're not a bank anymore. That's ridiculous, I said. It is, he said, with a strange, tired smile. But I tried for months to live inside ridiculous. The rent was high and the neighbors had parties all week. He lifted the recorder, clicked stop, then play. His tape responded with a voice like water inside a jar. No words, just shape. He listened as if the sound was a compass pointing to a place he didn't want to return but must. I felt a prickle at my ankles, as if the floor had cobwebs I couldn't see. Why me? I asked. You took 19 minutes that weren't yours. Or someone took them and left you the receipt. He nodded at the tapes. Either way, something wants its numbers balanced. How do I read the minutes? I asked, anger rising because fear had nowhere practical to go. Where do I go? A desk? A clerk? Do I feel a form? Elias looked at the wall of hands. He walked toward it with reverence. I hated to name reverence. He stopped 2 steps short. You stand where you made the mistake, you say. You leave something the minute can wear until it gets home. What does that mean? Something it can borrow your shape from. He touched his chest, then his wrists. Your heat, your voice, the shirt you wore the day you were cruel, the note you didn't send when you should've. It doesn't matter, as long as it mattered, and if it doesn't work, then you start counting, he said, and you never stop. I thought of Tuesday's tape, my own voice speaking out of a throat I trusted. I thought of the 19-minute cut that refused to show me what it hid. I thought of all the tiny places in my days where teeth had slipped gears lately. My editor saying the timestamps were off, the coffee cooling before it should, The microwave asking for seconds? I know I already gave it. Here's the thing, Elias said. The depot is a good place to start because all departures are theater. The door opened at the right minute, the boards alive with exits. Even closed, the ritual remains in the walls. But where did you first feel it? Where did the 19 go? I opened my mouth and a different answer came out than the one I'd intended. My uncle's apartment, I said. 6 years ago, the day we boxed his bull, we were 4 people, and then we were 3, and no one could remember when the 4th had left. You kept him in it then? Elias said gently. Because grief opens pockets, he disappeared, I said, because that was easier than saying, I think I loved him more than the ones who stayed. Maybe not in the way you think, he said. He picked up his player, slotted the unlabeled tape into his jacket, and switched the flashlight off. Darkness took our faces like a mother who refuses to let go. The tick accelerated, then slowed, then stopped altogether. In the new silence, the depot breathed once, settling. Somewhere behind us, a small sound like cloth slipping from a nail. We should go, Elias said, and I did not need to be told twice. We stepped backward. The way you leave a sleeping child you don't want to wake in the terrible way. The door remained open, admitting a stripe of streetlight that looked absurdly like a promise. Outside, the air felt used. The city had stopped performing. It was just itself again, a long animal with sore joints. We walked 2 blocks without speaking. At the corner, he looked at me, and whatever softness had lived in his expression burned away under something harder. They'll be back tomorrow, he said. The minutes, or the ones who collect them. You can run, but it's a small city for people who owe time. Meet me before it chooses for you. Where you took them first. He nodded once and turned left, leaving me with the map, the player, the number 19, and a door in my head that wouldn't shut. At home, my apartment smelled faintly of citrus, which I knew with the wrong kind of certainty I hadn't bought. The box of tapes sat on the table exactly where I'd left it, except the order was different. Thursday on top instead of Tuesday. The glass ID drunk from earlier had a ring of water under it I didn't remember leaving. My phone said 309. My microwave insisted it was 250. I pressed the player's counter reset just to hurt the illusion and went to the sink. I washed my hands slowly, watching the water rinse dust from the lines of my palm. When I reached for the towel, my fingers trembled with fatigue or borrowed adrenaline. My reflection in the dark kitchen window didn't tremble at all. It looked back at me with the stillness of a photograph taking a heartbeat after the shutter. I breathed in. Out. The seconds counted me anyway. On the table, the map waited, its red thread like a vein. Its X not on the depot anymore, but on a different block, the one where my uncle had lived. I hadn't moved it. It had moved itself the way a memory moves. Quietly tyrannical. Return what isn't yours, the careful hand had written. I don't know how, I whispered. The apartment answered by swallowing the hum of the refrigerator for exactly 19 seconds and then giving it back. I didn't sleep, because how could I sleep after the night had stolen its own name? Instead, I made a list in the Notes app titled Things Time Might Accept. I wrote, the key to my uncle's building, if I can find it, a letter I never sent, this shirt from the day I said something I can't forgive myself for saying, which is in a box at the back of my closet, beneath old winter things that still hold last year's cold. The list looked like a confession and felt like a shopping trip. At 5:42, the first birds argued the light into existence. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. No greeting, just 2 words. 19 returned. I typed back. Not yet. The reply came quickly. Then don't be late. I made coffee and burnt the toast and ate it anyway, because hunger is a kind of clock too. I placed Tuesday's tape back into the box and took Thursday's out and put it back and took it out again like I was rehearsing a magic trick. My eyes kept sliding to the blank tape with only the time on it to 17. If that minute had a gravity that betrayed the lie of numbers being equal, by the time the sun had real edges, I had showered, found the old shirt, ironed it for no reason, and folded it into my bag. I had also found the key to my Uncle's building at the bottom of a dish of paper clips, where I must have placed it 6 years ago. Because I had been trying to turn grief into office supplies. At 9:03, the tape recorder clicked on by itself. The counter spun from 000 to 019 as if arriving somewhere it had been traveling all night to reach. I pressed stop. It kept going. I pressed stop again, and the button resisted with rubbery indifference. Okay, I said to the recorder, the way you talk to an animal that doesn't belong in your kitchen but refuses to leave. Okay? The counter stopped on 019. The recorder exhaled a small, tired breath. I put it in my bag, slid the map into the outer pocket, and stood in the doorway of my apartment, wondering if there was anything here I should say goodbye to, in case goodbye would be required. The plant I always forget to water didn't look any worse, which felt like evidence of something I didn't want to comprehend. The fridge was humming again, and the box of tape sat like a collection of polite throats. In the hallway, the elevator still wore its lie. The stairs accepted me without remark. I had the sense, the knowledge that there were 19 minutes missing from the building itself. A softness in the corners where time would have sharpened paint to a scar if it had been allowed to accumulate. Outside, the city made a morning version of itself. I turned toward my uncle's street, and then it happened. Between one step and the next, the world blinked and came back wrong by the width of a breath. It felt like standing after sitting too long, like a rush and an absence at once. When I looked at my phone, the lock screen said 9:07. When I looked again, it still said 9:07. But 3 pedestrians had finished crossing, a bus had gone past, and a dog that was sniffing a pole had already decided it had obtained the truth from that pole and moved on. Not a freeze, not a glit, a gap. A place where something had been and now was not, and yet the world had politely filled in the hole and kept walking. My knees softened. I put a hand against a wall I did not intend to touch. The brick was warm. My palm left no print. I checked the recorder. The counter had climbed 2020. I should have gone home. I went forward. Uncle Sammy's building was 3 blocks of memory and 1 of brick. The lift was religious about its misery. It was broken for the same reasons it had ever been broken, and its apology sign had been laminated with optimism, then peeled back by years. I climbed the stairs, made me a petitioner again. On the 3rd floor landing, the window was open, and the hallway smelled like fried eggplant and soap. Apartment 3B had a new lock. Apartment 3C, my uncle's, had the same dent beside the knob where someone had tried to force it once and failed because the door had decided to be brave that day. The key ID kept since 6 Junes ago fit the lock like a truth you finally say because you think no one is listening. It turned. The door opened. The room beyond was not the room I remember, and yet it was exactly my uncle's apartment. Down to the rug he never rolled out straight, in the bookshelf where Conrad and Mahfouz reached arms across a shelf of dog-eared detective paperbacks. Dust lay like kind weather on everything. The coffee cup he'd left the last day he'd been certain of being someone's uncle sat on the table with a ring beneath it that had never dried. I stepped inside. The door fell shut behind me with an old lady's sigh. I could feel the gap hunting for my minutes. I took the shirt from my bag. I set it carefully on the arm of the chair where he used to sit reading the news and muttering to the headlines like they owed him money. I placed the tape recorder next to the cup, pressed record, and said aloud to whichever clerk manages these ledgers, I know I kept some. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a ledger entry with my name on it, inked without a hope that anyone would let me choose the interest rate. The tick began again somewhere under the floor. Not a clock, not a machine, something alive and patient and unimaginably old, counting without numbers, keeping time with hunger. The counter rose 2021. I didn't know whether that meant the minute had been returned, or the debt recalculated, or the game begun. I sat in my uncle's chair and waited for the room to decide if I belonged in it. The city moved outside the window like a river that had learned to wear streets. A noise from the hallway, a key turning, a bag placed carefully on the floor, a breath taken and released through the teeth end, then a knock at the door that carried 19 kinds of certainty in it. I stood, every small coin of courage in me counted, and reached for the knob. The knock was not loud, not polite either. It was the kind of knock that suggested the knocker already belonged inside, and the door was only an inconvenient piece of furniture between us. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. 3, 2, 2. Like someone spelling something in code. I froze with my hand still hovering over the knob. The shirt I had laid on my uncle's chair seemed to watch me, folded but tense, like it knew the knock was about it, not me. The tape recorder clicked softly, the counter holding steady at 021, waiting for me to decide if more digits would be added. Another knock, same rhythm. 3, 2, 2. Then silence. I whispered, "Who is it?" The voice that came back was mine. My own voice. "Maya," it said through the wood. Calm, without the tremor I felt in my chest. "Open. You're late." My throat tightened. The last time I'd heard my voice from outside my own mouth was on the Tuesday tape, narrating my life as if the future had already been archived. But this was different. This was now. Whoever stood behind that door carried my sound like a mask. I backed away, step by step, until the back of my knees hit the couch. My uncle's cup still sat on the table, half ringed by that eternal stain, the surface of its liquid flat and dark. For the first time, I wondered if there had ever been coffee in it. At Olora, if it was only a mirror waiting for the right angle. The knock came a third time. Louder. The rhythm broken now. Impatient. The recorder on the table rewound itself. The spools worry like small insects, and then pressed play without my hand touching it. My voice again, tinny through the speaker. "If you open the door, you will not come back the same. If you don't, the menace will collect you where you stand. Choose quickly. Either way, you belong to the count." The tape clicked off. The apartment hushed like a theater before the curtain rises. I thought of Elias, his warning not to touch the wall of hands, his certainty that time wasn't a river but a predator. He had told me, "You lost 19 already." Maybe the thing outside the door was those 19. Come back to wear me until I fit. Another knock. Softer this time, like coaxing. Then silence again. I forced my legs to move. Not to the door. To the kitchen. My uncle's drawers were still filled with cutlery and tools he never got around to fixing. I dug through until I found the heavy iron wrench he used to prop open windows in summer. I held it like a talisman, though it felt like a child's toy against what waited on the other side of the wood. "Maya," the voice repeated. "Open." I gripped the wrench tighter. "Not until you tell me what you want." The voice chuckled my chuckle, the one I use when I pretend I'm not nervous. "We want back what you owe. 19 minutes. Each one is a finger. We are almost complete." The words chilled me because they didn't sound like metaphor. They sounded like instructions. I looked at the wall where the faint tick had hidden earlier. This time, I saw it. Faint indentations appearing, one after another, like fresh handprints pushing out from the inside of the plaster. Counted, tallied, becoming. Becoming. I raised the wrench. My pulse pounded in my ears, not matching the seconds, but skipping them, erasing them as if even my blood wanted to lose track. The handle twisted all the way down, but the door did not open. Something, maybe the lock, maybe something less mechanical held it shut. The silence after the failed attempt was heavier than the noise itself. Then came the scraping. A fingernail or what? Pretended to be one. Tracing down the wood in slow, steady strokes. Scratch, pause, scratch. Each line deeper than the last, until the wood began to flake. I pressed myself against the far wall, wrench raised. "If you're me," I said, my voice unsteady, "then tell me something only I'd know." The scraping stopped. The thing outside whispered, "You never forgave yourself for leaving Uncle Sammy's balcony door open. That night, the rain ruined his books. He didn't shout, but you wished he had." My stomach nodded. It was true, an old memory, unremarkable except in the shame it left behind. No one else could have known. The voice grew softer, coaxing again. "Open, and I'll give them back to you the minute. The books, the chance to make it right. All you have to do is let me in." The wall behind me pulsed once, like a heartbeat. The handprints, still faint, were now wet, as if sweat seeped from the stone itself. My name seemed written in every line. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to scream, but something in me, anger, maybe, or the stubbornness I inherited from my mother, flared instead. "No," I said, my voice firming. "You're not me. You're what was left when time walked away." The silence outside was sudden and sharp. Then, laughter. Not my voice. This time, a man's, deep, patient, like rocks rolling underwater. "You're learning," it said, "but learning late." A heavy thud shook the door, as if a shoulder had slammed into it. Then another. Dust fell from the ceiling. The cup on the table trembled, its dark surface rippling with each impact. The recorder clicked on again by itself. Elias's voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, it found you earlier than we hoped. Do not open the door. Do not give it your name again. Keep moving until the place itself grows tired of holding you. If you stay still, it will use your minutes as bricks, and the wall will close." The thuds grew faster. The door bent inward with each strike. The hinges squealed like animals in pain. I backed toward the kitchen window. The third-floor drop yawned. Below trash bins. Asphalt? The possibility of breaking, but also the possibility of surviving. Behind me, the doorframe cracked with a scream that wasn't mine. The door exploded inward. Splinters flew across the room, slicing the air like angry insects. And in the doorway, there I was. Not a reflection. Not a shed of me. Same hair, same jacket, same wrench gripped in the same white-knuckled fist. But her eyes were wrong. Too dark, too steady, like the spaces between seconds had grown pupils. She smiled, and it was my smile, the way a mask is a face. "Finally," she said, "you're ready to return what you stole." For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. The other me, the one in the door, weighted her head, studying me the way a predator studies its own reflection in water. She lowered her wrench and let it clang against the floor. The sound echoed too long, stretching seconds like rubber. "You've carried them long enough," she said. 19 minutes. Fold it into your veins. They itch, don't they? That sense of missing steps, of thoughts that never finish. Give them back, and the itch ends. Her words slithered into me, almost convincing, almost soothing, but the air around her shimmered faintly, as though heat rose from her skin. She wasn't solid. She was stitched together from absences. No, I whispered, they're mine now. Her smile sharpened. Then you'll live hollow. Every minute you spend will echo. You'll laugh and forget the joke. You'll kiss and forget the name. You'll stand at your uncle's grave and not recall why you're crying hollow, until nothing in you weighs enough to stay. Behind her, the hallway bent strangely. Its corners sagged like fabric. The handprints on the back wall of the apartment deepened, pressing outward, reaching. I tightened my grip on the wrench. If they're mine, I can spend them how I want, and I choose not to give them to you. She lunged. Faster than thought. Her hand shot out, fingers aiming for my throat. I swung the wrench with every ounce of fear-forged strength. The iron connected, her face shattered not with blood, but with falling shards of clock hands, ticking needles, and fragments of my own laughter. She staggered back, the wound spilling seconds instead of red. I saw fascisme as a child on the balcony. Me holding Sammy's books to my chest. Me walking down streets I no longer remembered. Each fragment a stolen minute, slipping free. Her eyes widened. She screamed not in pain, but in hunger. Then she collapsed into dust and silence, leaving only the echo of ticking that had nowhere to belong. The apartment groaned, the walls flexed, the floor heaved. The handprints on the wall melted, dripping like ink, sliding toward the center of the room. They gathered into a single, enormous palm pressed into the floorboards. The recorder clicked on, my voice again, weary, like it had been recorded from too far away. You fought yourself. Good. But this isn't finished. What you destroyed was only the collector's mask. The dead still walks. At dawn, it will choose another door. If you want to survive, you have to follow the thread. Uncle Sammy knew the way. Now it's your turn. The tape snapped, the ribbon spilling out like a torn vein. I stumbled to the window, heart battering my ribs. The sky was spalling the edges of dawn, smudging the night. Down below, the street was empty, but the red thread from the map wasn't just ink anymore. It stretched out of my apartment window, glimmering faintly, tethering me to something beyond sight. I shoved the recorder into my bag, wiped dust from my face, and whispered to the silence, "Fine, I'll follow." Behind me, the giant palm sank back into the floor, leaving only darkness in its outline. The door to the hall stood whole again, unbroken, as if nothing had happened, but the air tasted like iron, and every shadow ticked. I climbed onto the sill, gripped the thread, and stepped into the waiting dawn. The red thread cut across the sky like a scar. From my window ledge it stretched outward, dipping between rooftops and antennae, winding deeper into the city. It glimmered faintly, not bright like neon, but steady, as if it remembered the sun and refused to dim. I gripped it with one hand, heart thrumming against my ribs, and lowered myself carefully until my shoes touched the awning above the bakery downstairs. The smell of old dough and sugar clung to the air. The street was empty. No cars, No dogs, no drifting bags, only the faint hum of dawn and the thread, taut, leading away. When my feet hit the ground, the silence broke somewhere far off. A clock tower struck 3, but each toll sounded wrong. Distorted, stretched, echoing not in the sky but inside my bones. 1, 2, 3. The third toll lasted far too long. A heavy note that smudged into the next second and stole its space. I followed the thread. It led me through narrow streets where shutters banged softly in the breeze. Though no breeze touched my skin, windows watched me with blank panes. Cats sat on walls, but their eyes glowed red, not reflecting light, but leaking it. At one corner, the thread split in 2 directions. Left it dove into an alley of broken neon signs. Right it! Curved toward the old library, Sammy's favorite place before it closed. Both threads pulsed faintly, demanding a choice. I whispered to the air. Which one? The recorder in my bag clicked. A voice Elias's rushed, urgent, burst out. Library. Always the library. If you stray, they'll count faster. So I turned. Right? The building loomed like a sleeping titan. Its windows dusty eyes, its doors chained with rust. But the thread didn't care. It wove straight through the iron links. Waited. I touched the chains. Cold. Solid. Then, as if acknowledging the thread's permission, they crumbled in my hands like burnt paper. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and pages long abandoned. Shelves hunched in crooked rows. Some books had spilled across the floor, their spines cracked open like ribs. The thread snaked between them, winding toward the reading hall at the back. As I walked, whispers rose, not from people, from the books themselves. Their pages fluttered without wind, reciting fragments. 19 lost, 19 owed. Time keeps its receipt. Return, return. My uncle's name surfaced in the chorus. Say me, Haddad, again and again, like a chant. The thread ended at the grand table in the center of the hall. On it lay a single book, leather-bound, blank of title. A candle beside it burned with black flame, casting shadows that moved the wrong way. I approached, hand trembling, and opened the book. Inside, not words, but photographs. Each page held an image of me at different ages, caught in moments I half remembered. My first day of school, my uncle's balcony, a night at the river with friends long gone. Beneath each photo was a timestamp, but the numbers were wrong. Some dates hadn't happened yet. Others were years before I was born. The black flame bent suddenly, as if blown from below. The shadows on the wall stretched, forming long-fingered hands. They reached for the book, for me. I slammed it shut. The whispers howled. And then, from behind me, you found it. I turned. Elias stood in the doorway, his own thread trailing into the room, coiled around his wrist like a leash. His face looked older, worn as though the minutes had been clawing at him too. This is where it began, he said, where they first traded time for memory. Your uncle tried to stop them. That's why he vanished. My throat tightened. You knew him? Elias nodded. We were in it together, but he owed more than 19. He owed years. The candle's black flame flared higher, licking the ceiling. The book trembled under my hands, trying to open itself. Elias stepped closer, eyes locked on mine. Maya, if you don't return those minutes now, they'll take you whole. The book is the only way, but it needs something more than words. It needs blood. The word blood echoed in my skull like a dropped coin rolling across stone. I stepped back, clutching the wrench tighter. Whose blood? Ilias's expression was unreadable, somewhere between pity and hunger. Yours or mine? Time doesn't care which, it only wants proof that you're willing to pay. The book on the table shuddered again. Its cover split slightly at the seam, like lips eager to swallow. The black flame guttered, throwing the room into wild shadows. Each shadow bent toward me, not Elias, as if they already knew who the sacrifice must be. I'm not cutting myself open for a book, I said, voice shaken. You don't understand, Ilias's tone hardened. Those 19 minutes, they're not just numbers. They're anchor. Each one ties you to a place where something else is waiting. If you don't release them, they'll drag you piece by piece until nothing of you is left in the present. Then why can't I just burn it? I gestured at the book. Destroy the whole thing. He almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. Try. I lifted the candle and tilted the black flame toward the book. For a moment, the cover caught and then the fire reversed, rushing up my arm. I screamed, dropping the candle, slapping at my sleeve. But the fire left no burn. Only a mark etched into my skin. A clock face with no hands, black against my wrist. Elias watched silently. It doesn't burn because it is the fire. You can't destroy the ledger you're written in. The book creaked open by itself, pages fluttering until it landed on a photograph I'd never seen. My uncle, standing in the very same hall, holding the same book. His eyes wide with terror, his mouth half open in a plea. Beneath the picture, instead of a time stamp, 2 words, debt taken. My knees weakened. I slammed the book shut again, though it felt like closing a coffin. Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice. Maya, listen. Sami gave them years, whole years. But he hid something to something they couldn't count. That's why they left the tapes for you. You're not just his niece. You're his heir in this war. The mark on my wrist itched, burning cold. Now, the black flame leaned toward it, as though bowing. Why me? I whispered. Because you already know how to keep time in your blood, Elias said. You've carried those 19 without collapsing. That makes you valuable. I wanted to shout at him, to demand why he hadn't warned me sooner. But before I could speak, the walls of the library groaned. Books flew from the shelves, pages tearing themselves free, swirling in the air like a storm of white moths. The whispers grew into a roar. Return. 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 The red thread tightened around my wrist, pulling me toward the table, toward the book. Elias grabbed my other arm. His grip was strong, almost desperate. You have to choose. Cut your skin and spill the 19 back into the pages, or give me the thread and I'll take them from you. I stared at him. And if I give them to you? His smile was faint but sharp. Then I'll be free, and you'll be forgotten. The storm of pages whipped around us, slicing tiny cuts across my cheeks and arms. The book thudded against the table, opening and closing like a hungry mouth. The black flame stretched higher, nearly touching the ceiling beams. My hand trembled over the book. The mark on my wrist pulsed with each heartbeat. Blood or betrayal, mine or his. The wrench slipped from my grip, clattering to the floor. I drew a breath that tasted of dust and ash. And then the recorder in my bag clicked on again. My uncle's voice this time, fragile, weary, but undeniably his. Maya, he said, don't give them what they ask. They count on your fear. The minutes are not theirs to claim. They are yours to spare. Choose. How? The storm froze. Mitter. Even Ilias's grip faltered. I stared at the recorder, at the book, at the black flame bending in obedience to the mark on my skin. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I realized I wasn't only a debtor. I was also a thief. A thief of time. The air held still, as if the world itself leaned in to hear my decision. Pages hovered. The book's mouth froze open, black flames suspended like a serpent about to strike. I closed my eyes and thought of those 19 minutes. The forgotten streets, the coffee that cooled too fast, the silences where words had fallen out of memory. They weren't just holes, they were possibilities. Unspent coins. A currency I could still use. When I opened my eyes, Elias was watching me with a predator's patience. Give them to me, he said. It's the only way. I shook my head. No? I'll spend them myself. Before he could stop me, I pressed my wrist the clock mark against the open book. But instead of cutting flesh, I spoke words I hadn't prepared, words that came from someplace deeper than thought. I spend them, I whispered, to bring back what was taken. The mark flared, burning white. The storm of pages screamed, then collapsed to the ground. The black flames sputtered, shrinking to a trembling candlelight. The book's photograph shifted beneath my hand. My uncle's terrified eyes softened, his mouth forming a faint smile. And then, impossibly, he stepped out of the page. Sami. Dust clung to him like old ash, but his body was whole, his presence undeniable. His eyes found mine, wet with gratitude. You kept them, he said, voice raw. You carried them long enough. Elias staggered back, shock twisting his features. No, that's not how it works. You can't spend minutes to reverse. But the library answered him with silence. The whispers had stopped. The ledger had been rewritten. Sami placed a hand on my shoulder. Warm, solid, real. Maya, you must leave now. The debt won't vanish it. We'll hunt again. But you've bought us time. More than enough. I wanted to collapse into his arms like a child, to demand answers, to tell him how much I had missed him. But already his form flickered, fading like smoke in sunlight. He smiled once more, then dissolved into 1,000 glowing motes that drifted upward through the ceiling into whatever sky kept him. The book snapped shut, the candle extinguished, and Elias's face twisted with fury lunged at me. You stole my freedom, he shouted. His thread tightened, wrapping around his arm like a serpent. He grabbed for mine, trying to rip the red cord from my wrist. But the moment his fingers touched it, his own thread snapped taut. It yanked him backward, dragging him into the shadows between shelves. He screamed, clawing, but the darkness swallowed him whole. When it cleared, there was nothing, only silence. I stood alone in the ruined library, the red thread still glowing faintly around my wrist. The book was gone. The candle gone. Only the echo of ticking remained. Faint, patient, promising it would never truly leave. I walked out into the door. The chains on the doors were whole again, but they parted for me. The city beyond was waking vendors opening stalls, children chasing each other down the street. To them, nothing had changed, but I knew better. On my wrist, the mark faded, leaving only a faint scar in the shape of a circle. My 19 minutes were gone spent, but I hadn't lost them. I had used them, and in return, I had gained something greater. The knowledge that time was not just a river to drown in. It was a weapon, a currency, a story we could bend. As I turned towards home, the recorder in my bag clicked one last time. My own voice spoke, calm and steady. It doesn't end here. The minutes will come again, but next time, you won't just return them. Next, I stopped, listening to the city's heartbeat. For once, it matched my own, and I smiled. And so the 19 minutes were spent. Not returned, not stolen, but used to buy a fragile freedom. But remember, time never forgets, and debts always return. If you enjoyed this journey through shadows and silence, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more haunting stories every week. Until next time, listen closely. You'll never know when the ticking will begin again.